Module 1. History of Multilateral Transparency Instruments. Module 1 provides an historical background of efforts to increase transparency in the international arms trade and establish reporting mechanisms on international arms transfers. This module will offer descriptions of existing agreements and regimes that are synergistic with the Arms Trade Treaty. The module will provide a brief history of key developments in global efforts towards transparency in the international arms trade, an overview of multilateral transparency instruments, and insight on relevant reporting instruments. Comprehensive and transparent reporting on arms exports and imports helps mitigate the risks of secret arms transfers. Such information generates awareness of global arms flows, which in turn creates an environment of responsibility and accountability for arms transfer decisions. Such openness serves as a confidence-building measure and encourages international cooperation. Transparency also supports conflict prevention by contributing towards early warning signals for potential violence and instability. States have undertaken a number of initiatives to increase transparency in international arms transfers in the last 100 years. For example, in 1924, the League of Nations created a statistical yearbook of the trade in arms, ammunition and material of war, with entries of individual countries reporting information on their arms exports and imports. World War II and the Cold War, however, made transparency much more difficult. The international political environment was plagued by a lack of trust and an unwillingness to share information. As a result, non-governmental organisations, such as the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, known as SIPRI, stepped in to try to fill the information gaps. In many cases, non-governmental sources of information on arms transfers were often the only sources for insight on international arms transfers available during this period. Yet governments did try to promote transparency within the UN framework during this period, with very little success, as Cold War politics played out on the UN stage through a variety of resolutions. The culmination of these efforts was the 1988 General Assembly Resolution 4375, which requested that the Secretary-General gather states' views on ways and means of providing for more openness and transparency with regard to worldwide arms transfers, and establish a group of government experts, or GGE, to conduct a study on ways and means of promoting transparency in international transfers of conventional arms on a universal and non-discriminatory basis. The willingness to reconsider transparency in arms transfers was renewed in the aftermath of the Gulf War, when governments around the world discovered the large number of weapons provided to Saddam Hussein in the lead-up to his invasion of Kuwait. Suddenly there was a renewed push towards greater transparency in the arms trade, as governments sought to prevent future secret arms build-ups and build greater confidence between states. In 1991, the General Assembly adopted Resolution 4636L on transparency in armaments, which requested that the Secretary-General establish and maintain a register of conventional arms to house data on international arms transfers, as well as military holdings and procurement through national production and relevant policies. The resolution also called on member states to provide information to this voluntary register on their annual arms exports and imports, including details regarding the transfers of 7 categories of weapons, battle tanks, armoured combat vehicles, large-caliber artillery systems, combat aircraft, attack helicopters, warships, and missiles or missile systems imported into or exported from their territory. In 1992, a group of technical experts submitted its report on the functioning of the UN Register of Conventional Arms, and 1993 represented the first year of reporting to the UN Register of Conventional Arms for transfers that had been undertaken in 1992. The register contains a list of country reports on annual arms exports and imports of major conventional weapons systems. Information contained in the annual reports includes the number of items, the state of origin, the intermediate locations, and a description of the transferred weapons. The register initially included 7 categories of weapons: battle tanks, armoured combat vehicles, large caliber artillery systems, combat aircraft, attack helicopters, warships, and missiles and missile launchers. Every 3 years, states convene a group of governmental experts to review the register's scope and provide recommendations for improvement. In 2003, states were encouraged to include information on their imports and exports of small arms and light weapons, referred to as SALW, and were further encouraged in 2006 to provide such information in standardized reporting templates. In 2016, the group of government experts recommended that states report on SALW transfers alongside the existing 7 categories of conventional weapons covered by the register. The most recent effort at transparency in arms transfers is the Arms Trade Treaty, which was adopted in April 2013 and entered into force on December 24, 2014. The ATT requires states parties to submit an initial report on measures undertaken to implement the treaty and annual reports on arms exports and imports to include information on authorizations and/or actual exports and imports of the conventional weapons under the scope of the ATT. States parties may also choose to share and exchange information on transit or transshipment and brokering transfers on a voluntary basis. Additionally, states parties may choose to provide a voluntary report to the ATT Secretariat on measures undertaken to address diversion. Governments have also pursued other multilateral and regional initiatives aimed at increasing transparency in the international arms trade, such as the Treaty on Conventional Arms Forces in Europe, the Wassenaar Arrangement, the Inter-American Convention on Transparency in Conventional Weapons Acquisition, the European Union's annual reports on arms exports, the Organisation for Security Cooperation in Europe's document on small arms and light weapons, and the Southeastern and Eastern Europe Clearinghouse for the Control of Small Arms and Light Weapons, or CSAC, regional reports on arms exports. In addition to regional and multilateral initiatives, some states also provide national reports on arms exports, many of which are publicly available. These reports vary considerably in how much information states provide, as well as in the level of substantive detail offered. National reports tend to contain insights on states' national export control systems and authorized export licenses. Some states may also choose to provide descriptive information on the goods as well as the end user or users. In compiling these reports, states use a variety of sources of information, with some states using customs data from the United Nations Commodity Trade Statistics database, also referred to as ComTrade.